Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Howdy folks, and welcome to this video about a new update to the OnePageRules rule set. OPR announced edition 3.3.1 today as part of their quarterly update, which is a little bit confusing since we're right smack in the middle of the second quarter, but oh well, c'est la vie. Let's take a look at the changes. The first big changes have to do with the new assault action that was released as part of version 3.3. It's been moved a little bit. Now it has been taken out of the core rules and moved to the additional actions section of the advanced rules, but that's not all. There have been some significant changes to the rules itself. As written, the new rule says, when taking an assault action, pick one enemy unit within the unit's charge range as its target. The unit must first shoot at the target and then must charge the target, but gets -1 to hit rolls for both shooting and melee. Note that units taking assault actions may not split fire to shoot at multiple targets and may not charge any other target if the original target is destroyed by shooting. Now, generally this is the same as the wording before, but with one notable exception. The movement restriction is gone. When assault was previously announced, one of the stipulations was the penalty to quality, but also half the charge distance. Whereas the new rule does not have that, meaning assaulting units can move the full 12 inches unless they have slow or something like that. Now, either that's a typo and got left out, or assault just got a whole lot better. Because I gotta tell you, from the few games I've played where I actually got to use assault, having that half distance to charge really was an important factor in limiting when you could use assault. Whereas now, if you can conduct an assault from 12 inches away, games are going to go a lot faster, and assault-heavy units like the Custodian Brothers are really going to be something to see on the tabletop now. Now, there were a couple of things that were clarified. That is, you must shoot at the unit you intend to charge, no splitting fire with other units, and you can't charge a different unit if the shooting phase kills the intended target. Now that all makes sense, but it's good to see that it's specified now. However, there is one element that is still unclear. The previous wording for the assault rule said that if the target is killed before the charging unit has reached base contact, then the unit that's charging may complete its remaining movement and then end its activation. The new wording for the assault rule doesn't say anything about that. If you destroy the target unit in the shooting part, it doesn't say whether you have to finish the move, can't finish the move, can finish part of the move. It's just left unanswered. So I imagine they're going to want us to just continue to use the way it was written previously here, but it would be nice if that could be officially clarified. Now, right after the assault action is a new one, the last stand action. This has also been added in the advanced rulebook under additional actions because both of these were previously taken out of the core rule set. And taking a look at this new last stand action, I'd say it's entirely bureaucratic, and honestly it seems kind of pointless. The shaken rule, as it appears in the 3.3.1 rulebook, says you get -1 to quality and defense, half your move distance, and no holding objectives. The new last stand activation says only shaken units may take last stand actions. When taking a last stand action, the unit counts as being in last stand instead of being shaken until its next activation, and then goes back to being shaken. Units in last stand get -1 to quality and defense rolls, have their movement, can't contest or seize objectives, and can't use any rules that require picking a target, for example, magic and psychic powers. The only difference here between Last Stand and Shaken is that Shaken can still use psychic powers where Last Stand can't, or at least the Shaken rule doesn't specifically prohibit the way Last Stand does. So I don't see any reason why you'd ever want to use the Last Stand rule, as based on Shaken as written, you have more options. There's literally no reason to take Last Stand. I think this may be a bit of a glitch on the part of OnePageRules, because the announcement that they released said that Shaken is returning to its, quote, previous state. However, the 3.3.1 rules have shaken as being the penalties and the half distance, and the 3.3 rules have that same penalty. We have to go all the way back to edition 3.2 to get to the truly old version where shaken means you're fatigued and you can't do anything until you recover. So now I think this is just a matter of confusing editions. OnePageRules needs to now mention edition numbers instead of just saying previous, because with so many recent updates and the fact that this news report is an additional update, to say previous is simply too relative. My guess is what they intended was that the shaken rules are going back to 3.2 and the last stand action is what incorporates the new -1 to quality, -1 to defense, half distance, no psychic powers, and no holding objectives. Otherwise, it's a complete waste of time. So that's my guess of what's actually happening. One last thing I'll say about the shaken rule. I think they need to add an entirely specific action called recover that simply removes shaken, rather than use the current wording which says this unit must remain idle and that removes shaken. It just seems a lot cleaner to say that you give an order to a unit, you order it to recover, that ends the shaken condition, and it clearly uses the action for that unit. Having it as this unit remains idle, well, I don't know, that just seems a little too open to potential disputes and arguments over what exactly that means. The next significant change, again, is more of a bureaucratic change. It's not an actual adjusting of the rules, but changing where you will find the rules. And that refers to line of sight. Previously, the core rules had 3 options for determining line of sight: true line of sight, top-down line of sight, and volumetric line of sight. Top-down and volumetric have been moved not just to the advanced rules, but to the tournament play section of the advanced rules. So the core rules now only have true line of sight. And I think this is a good idea, as it simplifies the core rules and uses the option that's the most natural and the most easy to explain, even though it might be more prone to potential arguments in a game. But friendly games, a simple dice roll can determine whether you can see something or whether you can't. Whereas the more exact ways to determine line of sight, when it really matters, such as in tournament play, that's now where you go to find those additional rules. So overall, I think this was a smart move. There are a few other tweaks to some features and special rules to clarify confusion and close some exploits and loopholes. The updates are already in the Army Forge, and you can find a list of these specific changes to particular armies and to some of the details of special rules on the OnePageRules news page. So I'm not going to go over them here, but there is one thing that I do think ought to be mentioned here. In the new advanced rules, OnePageRules has added rule packs that provide clusters or groupings of additional rules for players who don't want to worry about having to pick and choose among all the different options in the advanced rulebook. For example, players who want to play competitively can use the competitive play pack, which tells them to use the new deployment styles, the extra missions, and the side missions rules available from the advanced rulebook. Whereas players who don't necessarily want competitive but want more than the basic core rules could use the extended core pack, which includes deployment styles and extra missions just like the competitive, but also includes extra actions and solid buildings. And there's a whole bunch more that I'm not going to talk about because, again, those are for people who have bought the advanced rules, and I don't want to spoil anything here. Now, these rule packs aren't meant to be prohibitive. Players are still free to pick and choose and customize their games however the heck they want. But I think that these new packs are actually a good thing because it will allow players who aren't familiar with each other. Maybe you meet someone at a friendly local gaming store, maybe you have a pickup game, and you don't know the person well enough to go back and forth and pick which rules you'll use and which ones you won't. Instead, you can simply both agree, let's use the extended core pack, let's use the competitive pack, let's use the chaos pack, whichever one, and that way there's a nice bundle that everyone can agree to, and there's no arguing about, I want to use this rule, but not that one. Okay, so that's it for the quarterly update. Overall, there's not a lot of changes for those of us who've been playing with the new Assault and Shaken rules as it is. Most of the changes are more bureaucratic in nature, or they've been made to make sure that the initial learning curve of getting into the game stays pretty simple, allowing players to get more comfortable with the core rules before showing them all of the wider possibilities. So until next time, keep your dice on the table, and remember, it doesn't have to be perfect, as long as it's good enough.